I need to write this down, even though I know I was warned not to. They told me that memory itself was dangerous enough, that silence was survival. But silence feels worse than death, so I'm putting these words here. Maybe someone will believe me, or maybe this is just my last chance to hear myself before the rest of me slips into the path. It began, like so many bad stories do, with a simple job offer. I'd been out of work for months, rent overdue, fridge nearly empty, and my cat meowing every night for food I could barely afford. Then a message slipped into my inbox. No sender, no company name, nothing but a subject line that read, "Night watch needed. High pay. Absolute confidentiality." At first, I thought it was a scam, the kind of garbage people desperate like me click when they're out of options. But the longer I stared at it, the more it felt like it was staring back. The message didn't explain what I'd be guarding, only gave me coordinates and a single phone number. I called. Of course I called. The voice that answered wasn't a normal voice. It was calm, deliberate, deep enough that it didn't feel like it belonged to a human being. It didn't ask who I was, didn't want an interview, didn't care about experience. It simply said, "You've been selected. As long as you can follow instructions, the job is yours." I laughed nervously, my hand slick on the phone, and said, "That's it? Just follow instructions?" There was no pause before the reply. 7 instructions. 7 rules. Follow them, and you'll live. Break them, and you won't. It didn't explain further. It didn't need to. It just gave me a time, a date, and told me to wait at the edge of a desert highway as the sun went down. So I drove. The road stretched on longer than it should have, a strip of asphalt unrolling endlessly beneath the tires, and every mile made me feel like I was heading back to a place I had been before, though I knew I hadn't. The desert bled into the horizon with nothing but sand and heat haze, and yet when I arrived, there was nothing. No building, no outpost, just a chain-link fence half buried in sand with a single gate yawning open. And beyond it, a path, not a road, not even a real trail. Just ground where the dirt had hardened like glass, cutting across the desert in a line too straight, too deliberate. Someone was waiting for me. An old man, though the word man feels wrong. He stood at the gate in a heavy coat and wide-brimmed hat, even though the desert air was still hot enough to burn skin. His face stayed in shadow, his voice scraped like gravel when he said, "You're late." I looked at my watch. I wasn't late. I was exactly on time. He handed me a metal flask and told me to drink. The water inside was so cold it cut my throat on the way down, colder than ice. And when I gasped, he only muttered, "You'll need it." Then he gave me a folded piece of paper. But when I tried to take it, his hand clamped harder, knuckles pale in the moonlight. His voice dropped to a whisper. "These rules aren't suggestions. They are the only reason you will leave here alive." I didn't argue. I didn't dare. When he let go, the paper crinkled in my palm like it was more than just paper, as though it carried weight of something else. He said one last thing before he turned away and vanished into the dunes. "Follow the path until morning. Don't ask questions. Don't look for answers." His figure melted into the night, leaving me alone with nothing but the desert and that impossible road. The silence that followed was wrong. It wasn't stillness, but absence, as if the world itself had stopped breathing. No wind, no insects. Not even my own heartbeat sounded the same. I unfolded the paper. 7 short lines written in red stared back at me. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to crumple it and walk away. But the ink shimmered wet, though it didn't smear when I touched it, and the way the letters bent felt rushed, desperate, as if whoever had written them hadn't done it willingly. My throat tightened. I realized this wasn't an employment contract. It was a warning carved into my fate. I thought about leaving. For one long moment, I almost did. But then I remembered the rent, the cat, the hunger waiting back in my empty apartment. I told myself all I had to do was get through one night. Just one. So I stepped onto the path. The ground was wrong. It was too smooth, too cold, like glass stretched under the sun, humming faintly beneath my boots. I lifted my head and felt dizzy. because the horizon was shifting, bending, tilting away as though the desert itself was folding around me. My breath quickened, and though the night was hot, I shivered. The first night was supposed to be easy. That's what I told myself. Just walk, stay alert, follow the rules. But I hadn't taken 10 steps before I felt it, a presence moving with me, each step of mine answered by a step behind me, deliberate, patient, waiting. My grip tightened around the paper, my knuckles burning white. I wanted to turn around. God, I wanted to. But something deep inside whispered the first truth of this job. If I looked back, I wouldn't walk out of here alive. That was the beginning. That was the first step down the path to the unknown. And it was the last moment I believed I was still in control. The paper shook in my hand as I stood there on that glass-hard ground, the night pressing against me like a weight, and I realized I could no longer ignore what was written. 7 lines, uneven and red, stretching across the page. My first instinct was to laugh because they looked like the scribbles of a lunatic, but the silence around me smothered the humor in my throat. These weren't instructions. They were warnings carved into something deeper than ink. They were the map of a trap I had already stepped into. The first rule read, "Never speak of what lies beyond the 3rd gate." I frowned because there were no gates in sight, just an endless strip of black path winding into a horizon that didn't look right anymore. Still, the words crawled across my skin as if my body already knew there would be gates waiting, and that if I named what was behind them, it would name me back. The second line was no better. "If the lamps flicker, close your eyes and pray." There weren't any lamps in the desert, but the way it was written, sharp and slanted, told me the lamps weren't ordinary. They weren't put there to light my way. They were set to test me, to blind me, to force me into seeing something I wasn't supposed to. My fingers trembled, and I remembered the old man's words. "The only reason you'll leave here alive." He hadn't been warning me about the desert. He'd been warning me about the path itself. The third rule clawed at me as I read, "Do not step on the black stones." At first, that felt absurd. Everything around me looked black already. How could I avoid it? But when I glanced down, the ground wasn't uniform after all. Beneath the glass-like crust, I could see darker shapes shifting as though stones had been buried deep and were watching me. My stomach turned because I thought I saw one move, sliding like an eye beneath ice, and suddenly I understood. The stones weren't stones. They were something waiting to wake if I dared to touch them. I forced myself to read the fourth. "When you hear footsteps behind you, don't turn." My throat tightened because I had already heard them. Even before opening the page fully, I'd felt the presence, every step of mine echoed by another. My skin went cold as the words sank in. It wasn't a coincidence. Whatever was walking with me had always been there. The rule wasn't a warning about what might happen, it was confirmation of what was already happening. The fifth rule stabbed me like a blade. At midnight, leave the path, even if you are close to the end. My heart sank. If I was meant to guard the path until morning, why would I be ordered to leave it halfway through the night? The contradiction made me sweat, and I couldn't shake the feeling that midnight wasn't just a time, it was a threshold, that the path itself changed when the clock struck 12, and if I stayed, I'd cross into a place I couldn't escape. The sixth line was worse, somehow simple but suffocating. If you see yourself walking ahead, stop immediately. I read it twice, my pulse hammering in my ears. See myself? Did that mean a reflection, or a dream, or another me? The red letters seemed to writhe the longer I stared, and I had the sick realization that whoever had written this knew exactly what would appear on the path. That the path could split me open, duplicate me, twist me into something that wasn't mine anymore. Then came the seventh, the last, the one that made my chest feel hollow. Never touch the sigil carved into the ground. There were no details, no explanation, just those words etched like a curse. My eyes dragged back to the horizon, to that wrong-looking stretch of earth, and I swore I saw something faintly glowing in the distance, faint shapes etched into the black glass. My mouth went dry. My hand curled around the paper so hard it nearly tore. I stood there, reading those rules over and over, each one colder than the last. They weren't random, they weren't superstition, they were steps of a puzzle I couldn't yet see. They were pieces of a cage, designed not to keep me safe, but to keep something else contained. The realization struck me hard. This job was never about guarding a place. It was about guarding a secret buried within the path, and I was nothing more than another layer of protection, another sacrifice chosen to keep it hidden. The desert didn't move, but the silence shifted. It felt alive, listening, waiting to see if I would obey. My breath hitched as the first chill of fear settled fully into my bones. This wasn't just a list. This was my death sentence if I failed. I looked back down the length of the path, the black ground gleaming faintly in the starlight, and I knew the night had only just begun. The paper with its 7 red rules burned in my pocket as I forced myself to keep walking, each step sounding too loud against the glass-hard ground. The desert had never felt so alive, and yet so empty. I kept glancing at the horizon, but it refused to stay still. It bent and wavered as if the world was shifting its weight, pulling me forward whether I wanted to go or not. I told myself to breathe slow, to stay calm, that it was only a job, only one night. But the silence around me pressed harder with every step, until I began to wonder if the silence itself was listening. After a while, I noticed the air. It wasn't desert air anymore. It should have been dry, harsh, scraping against my lungs, but instead, it tasted damp, like stone walls after rain, like the breath of underground places that had never seen light. I wiped at my mouth and felt a strange film cling to my lips, and the thought hit me hard that maybe the path wasn't in the desert at all. Maybe the desert was just the entrance, a mask stretched over something deeper. I don't know how long I walked before it happened. At first, it was subtle, like the path humming beneath my boots, a vibration too soft to hear but heavy enough to crawl into my bones. Then I saw it. The first flicker. A lamp. A single rusted pole jutted out of the black ground up ahead, holding a lamp that shouldn't have existed out here, glowing weak and yellow like a dying firefly. The closer I got, the more it shuddered, the light swelling and shrinking as if something inside it couldn't decide whether to be alive or dead. And I remembered the second rule. If the lamps flicker, close your eyes and pray. My throat went tight. The rule wasn't meant as metaphor. It was literal. I stopped beneath that crooked lamp and squeezed my eyes shut, whispering a prayer I didn't even believe in, the words tumbling out clumsy and panicked. Behind my eyelids, the dark wasn't still. It pulsed with shapes, colors I'd never seen before, jagged flashes that clawed at the edges of my mind. I clenched my fists and kept whispering until the flashes dulled and the hum beneath my boots eased. When I opened my eyes, the lamp was steady, its glow faint but calm, and I staggered forward with the paper burning hotter in my pocket. I don't know how long it was before I heard the sound. Footsteps. Not echoes, not tricks of my own weight, but distinct steps falling behind mine, deliberate, patient, measured as if whatever followed me wanted me to know it was there. My spine turned to ice. I felt sweat crawl down my back, but the fourth rule slammed into my skull like a hammer. When you hear footsteps behind you, don't turn. My neck strained, every instinct screaming to look, but I forced my gaze forward, staring at the horizon until my eyes blurred. The footsteps matched mine, then slowed, then stopped altogether. And in that moment the silence grew so thick, I thought I would choke on it. I tried to distract myself by counting steps, by watching the path ahead, but the ground itself betrayed me. Just past the second lamp, I saw them. Shapes darker than the path, black stones half buried in the glass surface, their edges slick and wet, like things frozen mid-breath. I told myself it was nothing, just tricks of the light. But as I stepped closer, I saw one move, a slow shifting slide beneath the crust. The third rule clawed back into my mind. Do not step on the black stones. I shifted my stride, careful, forcing my boots to land on the clearer ground. But as I passed, I swore I saw one of the stones tilt upward, like an eye opening, like it was watching me leave. The deeper I went, the stranger the air became. It grew heavier, dampness turning into mist that curled low across the ground. My skin prickled as though the mist wasn't fog at all, but hands brushing against me, cold and searching. I gripped the strap of my pack and muttered to myself just to break the silence, but the sound didn't feel like mine anymore. My voice came back wrong, stretched thin, as if someone else were repeating me half a second behind. Then I saw the horizon shift again, and this time it wasn't a trick of the eyes. The path itself curved, bending upward like a stare into nothing, and far ahead I thought I saw shapes, arches, shadows that could have been gates. My chest locked. The first rule screamed from the paper, never speak of what lies beyond the third gate, and yet here it was, looming, waiting, daring me to approach. By then my hands were shaking so hard I could hear the paper crinkle with every step. The rules weren't distant possibilities anymore. They were alive, binding me, proving themselves one by one. And the worst part wasn't the footsteps or the lamps or the stones. The worst part was the feeling blooming in the back of my skull, that the path wasn't stretching into the desert at all. It was stretching into me. Every step further didn't just take me forward. It took me deeper, and I was starting to remember things I knew I was never supposed to. The further I walked, the more I realized the path wasn't going to let me escape without testing me. The lamps returned, crooked poles leaning out of the black glass at odd angles, their light trembling faintly as if the desert air was alive and breathing. Each time I passed, I remembered the second rule and closed my eyes, whispering fragments of prayers I didn't believe in, waiting until the shudder in the ground eased. It worked until I came to the lamp that didn't stop flickering. Its glow sputtered and died, then flared white-hot, then dimmed again, over and over, faster and faster, and I stood beneath it with my eyes shut so hard the veins in my forehead throbbed. But the flickering didn't end. It only grew stronger, the darkness behind my eyelids swelling into jagged flashes of shapes that pressed against me, whispering without sound. My knees shook, my breath broke, and after what felt like hours, I couldn't take it anymore. I opened my eyes. The world wasn't the same. The lamp was gone, its pole twisted into a charred skeleton. The path stretched ahead, but it wasn't empty. Something stood in the distance, tall, hunched, pale, its back curved into an arc that didn't belong to bone. Its head tilted at an angle too sharp for a human neck, and though it was far away, I could see its mouth. It was moving, forming words. I couldn't hear them, but I felt them, pulsing inside my skull, each syllable a nail driven into my brain. My hand shot to my pocket, clutching the paper, and the second rule screamed at me for what I'd done. Close your eyes and pray. I had broken it, and now the thing beyond the lamp had seen me. I stumbled forward, desperate to put distance between us, but the sound that followed froze my blood. Footsteps. Not the steady, measured echo from before. These were faster, heavier, chasing me across the black glass. My body screamed to look, but I bit down hard enough on my tongue to taste blood, forcing myself to keep staring forward. The fourth rule burned across my mind. Don't turn. My vision blurred with tears, but I kept walking, faster and faster until my boots slipped against the glass and I nearly fell. The footsteps behind me slowed then, their rhythm matching mine again, as if whatever was there enjoyed watching me squirm. I thought I had survived, until I saw the stones. They were everywhere now, slick black lumps pressing against the surface of the path, shifting faintly like lungs drawing breath. I tried to step between them, but the spaces grew smaller, the safe ground narrowing until it was almost impossible to move forward without touching them. My chest heaved, sweat dripped into my eyes. I had to make a choice. Turn back toward the footsteps or step where I wasn't supposed to. My boot slipped just once onto the edge of a stone. The effect was instant. The ground roared. A sound like cracking ice split the air, and the stone beneath me shifted fully, tearing itself free of the crust. It wasn't rock. It was a face. A black, featureless face with no eyes, no mouth, no nose, just a smooth surface that rippled like liquid. The instant my boot pressed against it, the surface sank inward, and I felt a pull, like my soul itself was being swallowed into it. I yanked my leg back, stumbling onto clear ground, and the stone face froze, trembling once before sliding back into the path. My chest convulsed with sobs I couldn't stop. I had broken another rule. I don't know how long I stood there shaking, but when I looked up again, the horizon had changed. The path no longer stretched straight. It split. Two directions, both gleaming black, both wrong. I blinked hard, convinced it was a trick, but then I saw movement on the left branch. A figure, walking, tall, slender, familiar. My breath caught in my throat as recognition hit. It was me, my gait, my shoulders, the tilt of my head. I was staring at my own body walking ahead, further down the path. The sixth rule tore through me. If you see yourself walking ahead, stop immediately. I froze, my legs trembling violently, every instinct screaming at me to chase, to catch up, to see if the figure was real. But I couldn't. I knew if I followed, if I broke that final barrier, I wouldn't be the one to come back. My double kept walking, its head tilted slightly toward me, as if it knew I was watching, as if it wanted me to follow. My fingernails dug into my palms, my voice shook as I whispered, "Don't." The word tasted bitter, like it didn't belong to me. I stayed still, rooted in terror, until the figure faded into the dark. Only then did the two paths bleed back into one, the ground smoothing into a single black strip. I had survived again, but the paper in my pocket no longer felt like protection. It felt like chains binding me to a game I couldn't win. I thought about turning back, about running toward the desert and never stopping, but I knew the path wasn't behind me anymore. The desert had vanished. There was only this road stretching deeper, bending into shapes no human should walk. And somewhere ahead, I swore I saw a faint red glow etched into the surface, curling lines carved into the glass like a symbol waiting for me to touch it. The seventh rule whispered like a curse in my skull. Never touch the sigil carved into the ground. That was when I understood I was doomed, because if the path wanted me to see the sigil, then sooner or later it would make sure I did. The glow on the path grew brighter the longer I stared at it, faint lines burning through the black glass like veins filled with molten blood. My body screamed to stop, but my legs kept moving, drawn forward as though every step was no longer mine to control. The seventh rule hammered inside my skull, repeating itself with every heartbeat: never touch the sigil carved into the ground. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my skin, whispering over and over that I wouldn't, that I would stop before I reached it. But the path didn't care. It had already decided I was going to see. The mist thickened until I could barely see more than a few feet ahead. The silence pressed harder, not the silence of emptiness, but of something listening. I felt eyes on me, dozens, maybe hundreds, watching from the mist. Every instinct screamed to flee. But when I turned my head slightly, I saw nothing but white fog curling against black glass, empty and endless. Then the whispers began. Not words, not at first, just breaths, long and drawn out, slipping through the air like someone leaning close to my ear. The hairs on my arms rose as the breaths grew sharper, forming syllables, my name stretching through the fog like a thread pulled taut. Michael. I froze. That wasn't possible. I'd never told anyone my name, not the voice on the phone, not the old man at the gate. And yet here it was, spoken clearly by something that shouldn't know me. My pulse hammered as the mist shifted, revealing shapes, silhouettes moving just out of focus, each one bent and broken, limbs too long, heads tilted at impossible angles. They didn't move like people. They swayed, like puppets caught in a wind that wasn't there, but their voices merged into one steady chant, repeating my name over and over until the sound drilled through my skull. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't stop. The sound wasn't in the air anymore. It was inside me. I stumbled forward, desperate to escape, and that was when I saw the sigil clearly. It sprawled across the path in twisting lines, etched deep into the glass, glowing red like the veins of some buried heart. The design made no sense, a tangle of symbols that shifted when I blinked, rearranging into new patterns, new words I didn't recognize but somehow understood. My knees buckled as a memory tore through me, sharp and violent. A room, white walls, a table with restraints, a voice overhead saying, "Subject MB resists memory suppression." I gasped, clawing at my temples as the scene fractured into static, then vanished. The sigil pulsed again, and another memory ripped free. A mirror fogged with condensation, letters traced in the mist by an unseen hand. "Remember, Michael." My chest tightened. I remembered standing there, staring at those words, but I didn't remember when. The memory was wrong, jagged, like it didn't belong to the life I thought I had. I staggered back, shaking my head, but the sigil burned brighter, dragging more from me with every heartbeat. I saw needles piercing my skin. I saw wires threaded into my arms, my head strapped down, as voices muttered from the darkness, saying things I couldn't understand. I smelled chemicals, sweet and acrid, burning my throat. And then, beneath all of it, the same phrase repeating again and again, mechanical and cold. "You are guarding yourself. You are guarding the secret of what you are." My stomach heaved. I fell to my knees, vomiting bile onto the black glass. My reflection stared back from the puddle, but it wasn't mine. Its mouth didn't move with mine, its eyes too wide, its smile too sharp. The reflection whispered, "You broke the rules. Now you're remembering." I stumbled back, heart pounding, and the mist writhed with laughter, high, shrill, overlapping voices mocking me. The silhouettes in the fog grew clearer, and to my horror, I recognized them. Faces half familiar, people I thought I'd seen once in my life. The man at the corner store, a teacher from years ago, a friend whose number I never saved. They were all wrong, their eyes black voids, their jaws hanging slack, but I knew them. And then it hit me. I hadn't seen them in life. I had seen them here, on the path. They had been guards before me. The paper in my pocket burned hotter, and when I yanked it out, the rules had changed. They were no longer warnings, they were memories. Each one was something I had already lived, already failed. My throat closed as the words bled across the page, new letters scrawling themselves in the same red ink. Rule 8. You cannot escape yourself. I screamed, tearing the page to pieces, but the pieces floated in the air, glowing, spinning into the mist before vanishing like ash. The chant of my name grew louder, now overlapping with words I didn't understand, syllables that scraped against my mind until I felt blood run from my nose. My body convulsed, my knees buckling, and I collapsed onto the sigil. The moment my hand touched it, the world ripped open. The desert, the mist, the path. All of it split apart, tearing like paper to reveal what had been hidden beneath. A room of white walls, a dozen mirrors surrounding me, wires trailing from my skin, the smell of chemicals flooding my lungs, and in every mirror, a version of me. Some older, some younger, some broken, some screaming. Each one stared at me with the same hollow eyes. One of them spoke, voice low and trembling, and I knew it was the truth I'd been guarding all along. You were never hired, you were never chosen, you were made, and the path isn't outside. It's the inside of your mind, carved into you to keep the secret buried. Every rule is a lock. Every step is a memory trying to surface. And if you keep walking, you will remember everything. I tried to deny it, but the words clawed into me, and somewhere deep inside, I knew they were right. The rules weren't protecting me from the path. They were protecting the world from me. I don't know how long I was on the floor, my hand pressed against that burning sigil, the world folding in on itself. The mirrors around me flickered in and out, sometimes showing the desert, sometimes the room with white walls, sometimes nothing at all. My own reflection shifted every time I blinked, older, younger, scarred, bleeding, even dead. But always me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The only steady sound was the chant. My name repeated endlessly, overlapping until it was no longer a word but a rhythm, a drum beating inside my chest. I pulled my hand away, desperate to break free, and the sigil went dark. The mist swallowed everything again, smothering the mirrors and the walls, leaving only the path stretching forward into blackness. For a moment I thought I had escaped, that maybe this was just a hallucination, a side effect of whatever the hell they had pumped into me before sending me out here. But then I noticed the paper in my hand again. It wasn't torn anymore. The 7 rules were back, written neatly in red, and below them was a new line forming, the letters crawling across the page as if written by an invisible hand. Rule 9. When the path opens inside you, it never closes. I staggered to my feet, chest heaving, and tried to run. The path seemed endless, every step leading me back to the same stretch of ground, the same mist, the same echoing silence. My legs burned, my throat tore with each breath, but I couldn't escape. And then the footsteps returned, not the careful, patient ones that had followed me before. These were fast, sharp, slamming against the ground like something chasing me, something no longer willing to wait. I wanted to turn, God, I wanted to, but the 4th rule still pulsed in my skull. Don't look back. The footsteps drew closer until I felt breath against my neck. I shut my eyes, praying like the rules had told me, whispering through clenched teeth, but when I opened them again, I wasn't on the path anymore. I was in my apartment. My couch sat against the far wall, the fridge hummed faintly, and Pixel, my cat, was curled in her usual spot, staring at me with wide green eyes. Relief crashed through me so hard I almost collapsed. I stumbled toward her, whispering her name, reaching out a hand, but when she blinked, her pupils were wrong. They were too wide, swallowing her eyes completely, 2 black holes boring into me. Her mouth opened, not to meow, but to whisper. Remember, Michael. The sound wasn't hers. It was mine. My own voice spilling from her mouth, distorted and broken. I fell back, slamming against the wall, heart pounding so violently I thought it would split. I squeezed my eyes shut, and when I opened them again, the apartment was gone. The path stretched before me once more, endless and black, the mist curling around my ankles. Pixel wasn't there. My home wasn't there. Nothing was. Just me. The path and the rules etched deeper into my mind. The paper in my hand had changed again. The red ink was still wet, smearing across my skin, and below the 9th rule, a final line was still being written, letter by letter, as if the path itself wanted me to read it. My throat closed as I watched it form. Rule 10. Do not tell them what you have remembered. I wanted to scream, to throw the paper away, but it clung to my hand, the ink soaking into my skin until it burned. And in the silence, I heard the voice again, the same deep, calm voice that had answered the phone days ago. Only this time, it wasn't in my ear. It was inside my head. Subject MB has progressed beyond suppression. The memory breach is spreading. Begin containment. The mist surged, rising like a wave, and I felt it pour into my mouth, my eyes, my lungs. I collapsed, choking, clawing at the ground, and as the darkness swallowed me whole, the last thing I saw was a mirror forming in the glass beneath me. My own face stared back, smiling even though I wasn't. Now I don't know if I'm writing this as a warning, or as a confession, or if I'm just another version of myself trapped on the path. I only know one thing for certain. The path isn't outside anymore. It's inside me. And it's opening again.